Muslims in America today are more afraid than they've ever been, and they may have reason to be. Since the start of the war, thousands of Iraqis in the United States have been questioned by the authorities. After September 11th, some 1,200 Muslim men were rounded up. Many were not only questioned, but detained so long in such miserable conditions that the Justice Department's Inspector General is investigating what happened. He's trying to determine why so many of those men were held in solitary confinement in maximum security prisons for months on end, without their families being notified, with no real access to legal aid, and without being charged with a crime. Had you been charged with any criminal offense?
No, I never been charged.
And how long did you spend in custody altogether?
73 days.
Why did anyone ever think you might be a terrorist?
Because I'm Muslim.
Hadi Omar, who came to the United States from Egypt 3.5 years ago, lives in Arkansas with his wife Candy, an Arkansas native, and their daughter Jasmine. On September 12th, he just returned from a trip to Florida where he was trying to start an antiques business. Minutes later, police and FBI agents pulled up in front of the house.
They were running actually toward me and they had their hand on their guns.
And you're holding your daughter?
Yes.
And then what happened?
One of them said, "You're not under arrest or anything. We're just going for a talk." I said, "Okay."
He was taken into custody and grilled for more than 7 hours. Then he was taken in handcuffs to the local jail and placed under arrest. He says he even passed a lie detector test, but still wasn't allowed to leave. Did you ask to call a lawyer?
Yeah, I asked him to call a lawyer, and he said, well, he can't use the phone.
Can't use the phone.
Yeah.
The next morning, he was the talk of his town. The headline of the local paper read, "Terror Strikes Home." What did you think was going on at this point?
Actually, I had no idea what was going on. Nobody told me anything.
No one told her, for example, that her husband had been taken from the local jail in shackles and driven through the night to Louisiana, where he wound up in the Pollock Maximum Security Prison. Before going to his cell, he says, prison officials videotaped him as he was stripped naked and given a rectal exam in front of an audience of agents, men and women.
I feel like a man, when they're searching me like this. I didn't feel like a man.
The authorities deny that women were watching, but they don't deny that Hadi Omar spent the next 2 months in solitary confinement, with the lights on 24 hours a day.
The cell was freezing. It was cold. I would ask them, to give me an extra blanket, and they would say, "No, you got what you got."
Hadi Omar says one federal agent told him he'd been arrested because he bought a plane ticket from a computer terminal at this Kinko's in Florida. The same Kinko's where the agent said Mohammed Atta, leader of the September 11th terrorists, had also purchased a ticket. But no one has officially told either Hadi Omar or the lawyer he was eventually allowed to contact why he was kept in a maximum security prison where he ended up contemplating suicide. You gave up hope.
Yeah. I just start feeling that I'm not gonna ever get out of there. And I felt it's like, like I'm dead and this is hell.
The government was able to hold Hadi Omar and hundreds of other Muslim detainees by charging them not as criminals, but as visa violators. The law says criminals, even murderers, must be charged with a crime quickly, usually within 48 hours, or be released. Immigration laws used to work the same way, but after 9/11, the Justice Department rewrote the rules so that suspected visa violators can be held in jail as long as the government wants, without any charges filed against them. Hadi Omar, who was arrested as a suspected terrorist, was ultimately charged only with overstaying a tourist visa. After 2.5 months in custody, he was released on bond. Robert Rubin is Hadi Omar's lawyer and the legal director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. He says that before September 11th, it would have been unheard of to arrest someone like Hadi Omar and put him in solitary confinement. The government, I imagine, might say that extraordinary times, extraordinary circumstances, extraordinary treatment. An Egyptian, a Muslim, after 9/11, we needed to hold him and keep him and search him before we let him go. What do you say to that?
It certainly doesn't justify denying him access to counsel. It certainly doesn't justify denying him access to his U.S. citizen wife and his U.S. citizen child. Any concern that the United States had about Hadi Omar being a security risk, terrorist threat, could have been easily resolved in a matter of hours, if not days, of humanized treatment, not the kind of dehumanizing conditions that he was subjected to.
With the help of Rubin and a legal team from the firm of Morrison and Forster, Hadi Omar has filed a lawsuit against the government, claiming that his civil rights were violated and that his treatment could be characterized as torture. There were some 1,200 guys rounded up after September 11. What happened to all the others?
The overwhelming majority were deported without most of us ever even knowing who they were or what they were guilty of, and they were whisked out of the country in secret.
Of the 1,200 men detained after September 11th, the government claims about 130 of them actually did commit crimes. Shakir Balash is one of them. Balash, a Canadian citizen born in Pakistan, admits he entered the U.S. illegally, which is a criminal offense. He wanted to take classes at this New York hospital to become an ultrasound technician. He was arrested soon after September 11th.
So I remember one of the officers, he told me that you did this thing to us, we will kill you here.
He was sent to the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York, where he claims 5 prison officials smashed him against the prison walls.
5 people, they lift me up
And they hit your head against the wall?
my whole body.
Your whole body?
Yeah. At every corner of the room. And then they told me that I will keep my mouth shut. I'm a suspected terrorist for 9/11.
William Goodman, Balash's lawyer, works with the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York.
Now, it sounds extreme. The fact is, I interviewed dozens of people in Shakir's situation, and one after another they told me this story, that upon entry, someone would take their head, smash it into the wall, and then make some statement about them being a 9/11 terrorist or something like that.
Shakir Balash spent 7 months in prison, 5 of them in solitary. What's it like being in solitary confinement for 5 months? What do you do every day?
I had nothing to do, just trying to sleep, and then in that small cell there were 2 big lights, like searchlights, and I was not allowed to put blanket on my face.
The Justice Department never notified his family or the Canadian government that he was in custody. Eventually, he was deported back to Toronto, but Balash says his ordeal is far from over. He suffers from depression and flashbacks, and he hasn't been able to work.
I cannot concentrate, and when I start reading even newspaper, I get headache very quickly.
Balash's lawyer has filed a class action lawsuit against the government on behalf of Balash and the other detainees who were rounded up in the wake of September 11th. Mr. Goodman, here you are defending the rights of Muslims in America, which are the same group of people that attacked us more than a year ago. Why should Americans really care about this?
Once we say we can dispense with the rights of the most hated amongst us, who's next? The second most hated? Then those who are hated less, and finally, all of us.
We wanted to talk to Attorney General Ashcroft, or in fact anyone from the Justice Department, about what happened to Hadi Omar and the other detainees. They declined. But 3 months after 9/11, the Attorney General told the Senate Judiciary Committee that the detentions were both legal and necessary to keep the nation secure.
Our efforts have been crafted carefully to avoid infringing on constitutional rights while saving American lives.
Even post 9/11, and perhaps particularly post 9/11, we've got to make sure that in fighting this so-called war on terrorism, we don't compromise those very freedoms that we're supposedly fighting for.
As for Hadi Omar, he'll find out soon whether or not his against the U.S. government will go forward. And he has an immigration hearing coming up. That's when he'll learn if he can stay in America with his family or if he'll be deported back to Egypt.